It's no mystery that one of the few things I like to rank and make top 10 videos of is the topic of boss fights. So why haven't I made a top 10 God of War boss fights video yet? Well, if you were subscribed to my channel since the early days, you would remember that I had in fact done one, but then erased it along with a bunch of original theories, leaving my channel dormant for a few months until restarting my uploads with a top 10 shadow of the Colossus bosses. So yeah, bosses are kinda my thing. With that said, tackling the topic of the best 10 God of War bosses is no easy matter, as the series has over 30 plus bosses, resulting in some great ones being left out, and that makes me sad. But still, I cannot sit on the fence much longer. The world needs to know my opinion on this trivial matter. So move over and watch Mojo, it's time to shame your list for putting Hercules at number 10. Cause let's be honest, he shouldn't even be on the list. As soon as you boot up God of War 2, you are met with a version of Kratos that can take on the most powerful fictional characters all the way from movies to games. This of course does not last long, as Zeus takes away your powers and gives them to the Colossus of Rhodes, allowing him to become alive in the process. Although the fight is not mechanically impressive, it was a really fun way of easing the player into this action-filled game, as the Colossus breaks through buildings to get a hold of Kratos, making Kratos think outside the box as to how to take down this huge foe. Aside from these cinematic moments, the fight did have some parts where the player was required to do more than just press a button, like dodging his attacks or jumping back and forth to trap his arms in mechanical gears. And when that didn't work, the game would have you go inside his tummy, destroying him from the inside, until you reach his dangly mouth thingy. What is that thing called again?
Uvula.
The Colossus of Rhodes helped put God of War 2 as one of the most action-filled games of the PlayStation 2 era, but its lack of difficulty and player input places it at the highest spot on the list, and the truth is, the series has never recovered from these flaws. Obviously I'm kidding, the series has in fact recovered from these flaws, especially the challenge, and who better to show this difficulty increase than freaking Sigrun. All throughout the game you found yourself fighting these menacing Valkyries. Although they were difficult to beat, the last fight would prove to be undescribably hard, as it combined every ability her weaker sisters used, plus a huge health bar that would seem to never decrease. It's almost as if Cory Barlog saw Dark Souls and said, "Hold my Lemian wine." You're not even eased into the fight with a cutscene. She begins by scraping your face against the floor. What comes after is a series of deaths that leaves Atreus' knees sore from resurrecting you hundreds of times. Chances are you'll need to go hunt some goodies at Niflheim before you can actually fight her. It may sound like I'm complaining, but killing Sigrun was one of the most satisfying moments in the entire series. And I hope these types of optional bosses become a series regular.
Boy. Surrender. The All-Father demands it. No.
Magni and Modi, sons of Thor. Although minor deities in the Norse mythology pantheon, they are no weaklings at all. Mimir tells us the story of how Magni lifted the arm of a dead Jotun to save his father, while Modi just watched. Okay, so Modi is kind of a weakling, which works perfectly because he mostly attacks Atreus, while Magni fights a guy who, much like him, has lifted arms of giant beings before. It was refreshing having a boss fight that had Atreus take a more active role as opposed to watching from above, or in the case of the intro, hiding in a cabin. But the fight mainly makes it on the list for having the most synchronized dual bosses in the series, a concept that was lightly explored in God of War Ascension, but ultimately failed. As I've said before, Magni mostly focuses on Kratos, but he'll eventually throw the player off by switching dance partners. While Magni fights the player, he has to mind his devastating horizontal attacks, unlike Modi, who guards himself behind his shield and shoots projectiles from afar, leaving small windows to attack him. This level of cooperation reaches its highest point by the last stage, when they both get enhanced electrical powers and start jumping from each other, making devastating electrical attacks. Although the fight did have its obvious weak moment, it should be looked at on how to make a fun dual boss fight for future games. Okay, I've said it before, I don't know whether Cronus is a boss fight or a level, and since I've already included him in my previous list, I might as well be safe and give him a spot alongside other awesome fights. To this day I still have a save point minutes before the fight with Cronus begins, just in case I need a pick-me-up for the day. Yeah, it's that good. Honestly, we have to give credit to the group of people who designed this battle. From Cronus animation to the level of gore, or my favorite, how well Kratos' equipment was implemented. Since the beginning of the fight, Kratos has to use Helios' head to blind them, only to use Hermes' boots to run away from his massive hand, and finishing up the fight by breaking the chain that held Pandora's temple with the Nemean cestus. Every item Kratos had acquired throughout the game got a chance to be in the spotlight. I know the fight is a little bit scripted, but that does not necessarily make it a bad thing. Think about Shadow of the Colossus, a game revered for its awesome gigantic fights. You can tell that it was already getting hard for the developers to spice up the formula by the end. That problem is not present with Cronus. You will pop his skin sores, rip out his nails, stab his hand, do some sick upside down Spartan parkour moves, go inside his stomach, and come out like a beast. It's a wild ride from start to finish, and if it meant sacrificing player freedom, well, I think we can say it was worth it. Ever since Kratos killed Persephone during the events of Chains of Olympus, Hades had been plotting to put an end to the Ghost of Sparta. This confrontation finally arrived in God of War 3, as Kratos made his way into the most egotistical boss battle arena in the whole series. Once inside Hades, Hades tries to get a head start by snatching Kratos' soul. You know, God of the Underworld business. I can understand his attempt at ending the fight in 2 seconds, since Kratos engages in what I like to call splinter warfare. No matter what he does, Kratos always manages to cut a tiny part of his body, enraging the God of the Underworld more and more. And it's not like Hades is letting him do all that, he really throws at him everything he's got. Floating skulls, Cerberus, ground stumps, portal hooks. The fight reaches a pivotal point when they both engage in a rather awkward tug of war that results in Kratos obtaining his hooks. Just as you practice with your new weapons, Hades comes out of the river Styx uglier than ever. Immediately you'll notice the fight taking a more traditional approach. No longer is it about carefully dodging his attacks and searching the arena for a better strategic position. An explanation for it being drastically easier than the first half is to ease the player into their new weapons. If that's the case, this part of the fight can be forgiven. Also, you ironically steal his soul as he falls into the river Styx only to be overtaken by the souls he imprisoned. Talk about an ironic death, huh? Let me ask you something, were you a young boy back in the 90s, tired of all the Disney movies coming out to critical acclaim? Were you tired of not being represented by Hollywood? Well then, you probably liked the movie Hercules, the story about a demigod mastering his powers by fighting all manner of giant creatures. I wonder how his life on Mount Olympus turned out. Okay, probably not the same Hercules. This Hercules has had it. He had to clean stables, and lives with his mother, and that's as worse as it gets. Well, we've picked up poop in the stables found in Red Dead. Hercules' biggest accomplishment was killing the Nemean lion, which prompted him to make 2 gauntlets depicting such foe. The battle with Hercules takes place in a gladiator-like arena as Hera watches these 2 demigods trade punches. At first I thought the fight was going to be one of those enemy spawning bosses, but midway through the fight, Hercules clears them out of the way, allowing the 2 siblings to fight properly. Hercules does a good job at mixing defensive stances with his offensive attacks, making the player use all of the items in his inventory for better results. You even get to rip his gauntlets and use them against himself. His approach becomes more tactical in this stage as he waits for an opening to grab you and deal massive damage. Hercules was originally going to have a more embarrassing death, one that involved Kratos dropping a temple on him. Although his death is not glorious, he did get to stand up to the God of War himself. Who am I kidding? His body decomposed in sewer water. Let's move on.
Your final lesson is at hand.
Ares, the God of War, the first big baddie of the series. We really have to commend Santa Monica for making us hate Ares since we started the game. By the end, the focus of Kratos' rage was within a few meters. All he needed to do was open Pandora's box and receive equal footing against the God of War. And then the fight was off to the races. Honestly, the first part was decent. All you had to do was spam your magic attacks until he cleared his throat like a god with tuberculosis. Then came one of the most deep moments of the series as I saw Kratos defending his family from himself, pointing to the fact that he's the real monster of the story. But none of these moments puts this fight this high on the list. It's the final stage. I never hear people who include this fight in their top 10s talk about this shared health bar design. Essentially, you couldn't go in and drain his health bar like in the first stage. If Ares hits you, he would get some of your health, adding to his. And if Kratos would hit him back, that health previously lost would be regained. Depending on your level of skill, the fight could either last less than a minute or it could take forever, showing the player what it takes to kill a god in a video game. Many broken square buttons. A few entries back I said killing Sigrun was the most satisfying moment of the series. I take that back now. Play this fight on God difficulty and you'll see what I mean.
This again?
For the number 3 entry, I wasn't sure whether to give it to the first encounter with Baldur or the final fight with him, and I think fans of the series are equally divided, but at the end of the day I had to go with the final fight. For starters, the game did a great job of hyping up Baldur as an epic villain. All throughout the game he had been kicking your butt with his immortality. If it wasn't for Atreus' conveniently placed mistletoe arrow, Kratos might have died at the hands of this insane god. But man, oh man, as soon as the spell was lifted, all the work you put into the Leviathan axe, the Blades of Chaos, and your armor is put to the test against a god that can change between fire and ice attacks in an instant. Even Freya tries preventing both gods from fighting by using vines to trap them in place. Her involvement in the fight becomes more profound when she reanimates Thamur the Giant to hit him with his chisel. It's one of the most cinematic fights in the entire series that sees Atreus' training come to an end with his involvement in the fight. Not to mention that it was the only fight that allowed Kratos to show off his Blades of Chaos against a Norse god. Baldur himself is a fast and powerful boss that will test all of the skills you've learned throughout the game. It would have been cool to have dealt the final killing blow right after the fight, but I'll settle for the classic L1 plus circle move.
Put her down! As you wish.
There's no other fight on this list that has this level of hype. Even people who never played the previous games felt it. The King of the Gods is obviously not a pushover. He doesn't have a health bar for you to decimate instantly. You have to face him 3 times before you can actually kill him. In the first stage he focuses on disappearing and attacking from a distance, hoping to tire the Ghost of Sparta. This plan does not work as Kratos drops a freaking wall on him, leaving him to run away. Once Kratos catches up to him, the player has to survive his attacks until good old Gaia shows up, getting to the heart of the matter. While the first 2 stages were designed to build up more hype, this last encounter makes the player use every move he's learned throughout the game and putting them to use against the strongest version of Zeus, one who can spawn clones out of thin air. It wouldn't be too difficult fighting them if the game didn't make you juggle doing so and preventing the real Zeus from taking Gaia's health all at the same time. To top it all off, the fight ends with a quick time that has Kratos pushing Zeus towards Gaia's heart only to stab them both with the Blade of Olympus. God of War 2 had a lot of boss fights that mostly failed to reach a high level of quality, except the fight against Lachesis and Atropos. Even though Zeus was the final fight of the game, this fight did the best job at making the player think on his feet. It would require you to avoid aerial projectiles by using the wings of Icarus and grapple points, perfectly deflecting Lachesis' projectiles with the Golden Fleece. Mechanically, the fight is a thing of beauty. It also raised the stakes story-wise by sending Kratos back to the past, attempting to destroy the sword he used to kill Ares, which if you were curious enough to let Atropos destroy it, the game would reward you with one of the coolest cutscenes in the series. The fight beautifully comes together when both Atropos and Lachesis join forces to take on the Ghost of Sparta. During this stage, Kratos has to focus on Lachesis, while Atropos sticks her head through another time in history to hit him with a large magical beam of light, leaving Kratos to use the ability to control time to freeze them in place while he does his business. This eventually results in trapping both sisters in the past, leaving them more exposed than Lachesis' boob. I have to admit, this moment would have single-handedly put this fight on the number 1 spot. I know it's gonna make me sound like a serial killer, but I just love that the game allowed me to take my time to choose the proper weapon to smash that last mirror, leaving them trapped in the past forever. Just watch as they beg for their life. So there you have it, my top 10 God of War boss fights of all time. This has been a really hard list to do. Like, this is a topic that I love, and like I said before, I'm sad that I had to leave out some great boss fights. But anyways, leave a comment below telling me what your favorite bosses are, critiquing me. Maybe you liked Hecatoncheires, I don't know. Leave a comment below. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and share the video on, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time. Good.